Welcome to this week's episode of In the Know with Kat Bobineau. Today, my guest is Dr. Caleph Wilson. He's an industry scientist, and we're going to learn more about him. So, welcome to the show, Dr. Wilson.
Thank you very much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
All right, so can you explain to the audience what an industry scientist is?
I work at a biopharma company, and so we're on the side of developing products uh, to move into the clinic, and then from the clinic to a product that you can or therapies that you can get at the hospital.
Okay, and so your area of expertise is immunology, correct?
Yes.
And so, can you explain what immunology is?
Uh, in easy way to put it is immunology is studying the balance between health and illness, right? So if you think about you're going along healthy, you get an infection tips the balance towards illness. Your immune system responds to get rid of that illness and then gets and move the balance back to health.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how are some of the medicines that we take or some of the medicines that you're researching help your body get back to being normal?
So what my main thing I'm doing now is what I like to call teaching T cells how to kill cancer. And so what we're working on are some therapies to be able to give a patient immune cells that we've taught on the bench to kill cancer and give it to a patient and help them clear their cancers. So
Okay.
basically, it's shifting the balance from having a cancer to not having a cancer.
Okay, that sounds great. And so what made you get into this type of work? What made you go into immunology?
So when I was I'm a proud historically black college university grad. So graduated from Alcorn State University in Mississippi, which is my home state.
Okay.
And when I think I can remember for my junior senior year, but I was in a research talk, and a professor came down, John Mansfield from University of Wisconsin Madison, gave a talk talking about trypanosomes, a type of parasite that causes African sleeping sickness. But this particular type of trypanosome that he was studying, and so it was really interesting to see how you your your body responds to a parasite and how those things go, how doing studies go from the laboratory to textbooks or from the laboratory to treatments. And so that's something that was very exciting to me. And interesting story is interesting part of the story is that so I actually went to Dr. Mansfield's lab for the summer,
Mm-hmm.
and the first time that I got some interpretable data, it was exciting because I realized that I had done something and generated some information that nobody else knew, and if you can imagine, like this guy in his early 20s going outside and skipping along Lake Mendota and Madison like a little kid because it was an exciting thing. It's like, whoa, wait a minute,
Yeah.
this is possible. I can do this. I did an experiment. The experiment worked, and we have some usable data. So I was like, okay, this is what's up. So all right, let's roll with this.
So did you continue that? Did you like go and get your PhD under him and studying the African sleeping sickness?
No, no, actually, so I went back to campus, back to Alcorn State that fall, that next school year, and did some work looking at some peptides and how those peptides influence the immune system. And from there, I went to grad school at Penn State, and so I got my PhD in pathobiology. I studied a model that looked at modulation of information.
Mm-hmm.
So I went into immunology in a different area.
Okay.
So yeah.
That's really cool
Ooh,
because learning about African sleeping sickness, I don't think I ever really paid attention to the pathogen, just the source, which is the
yeah,
tsetse fly.
exactly.
So, learning more about the pathogen that actually causes the disease is really cool. It's the same thing as, learning about malaria and always people associate it with mosquito, but it's not really the mosquito that's
Yeah.
causing the malaria. They're
Yeah,
just different.
mosquitoes and tsetse flies are a vector. So if you think about them
Mm-hmm.
at like a syringe, right? So if you took a syringe and whatever you put in it, and if you injected someone with it, that the syringe itself didn't cause disease. That's whatever was in the syringe.
Right.
And so, and yeah, it's cool to learn about the life cycles. And but mosquitoes and tsetse flies are an important part. If you can disrupt them, you disrupt the life cycle, right?
Right. And
There you
so
go.
that's why we have a lot of people, but I think that's another conversation. I was about to say all the people who's all about destroying the mosquitoes and destroying the fly, but the way they do it, for me, I think it's going to cause a bigger effect ecology wise. So it's like a catch 22 on, we don't want these diseases that's going to hurt the humans, but then you don't want to eradicate the mosquito because they also could be an important part in ecology.
Yeah, I mean, it's balance, right? So if there's a certain amount of mosquitoes that can serve as a food source for animals like bats and other creatures, and they're part of the ecosystem, as you're saying, and but we don't want the so many mosquitoes that they're spreading malaria or any other mosquito-borne illness.
Right. So I
So
think
it's a balance.
it is a balance, and I believe I read somewhere where they were trying to genetically modify the mosquito so that it's not a carrier, but I don't think they were successful just yet.
Okay. You
But
mean
that's
carrier for malaria
yeah,
or
carrier for
okay.
malaria for the
Okay.
disease. But I
Interesting.
digress. I went off on a tangent. So back to you. And
Okay.
what made you go to Penn State to get your PhD?
So I applied to a few places and when I got to Penn State, I felt very comfortable. The department I was in had at the time had a lot of young assistant professors. They were a growing department. My rationale behind it was that I'm going to be around a lot of professors who are not too far away from their graduate training. At the time that made sense.
Mm-hmm.
So it was it was and it was a change. It was like going from Mississippi to Central Pennsylvania was a big shift in culture.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it was a good program. They made a good offer, and the rest is history.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna ask you that because, I'm from California, but I went to an HBCU. I went to Stillman College in Alabama, and that was a culture shock for me, but in a
Yeah.
good way. So, how was that culture, change for you going from Mississippi to Pennsylvania?
Well, I think from a small town perspective, it was there. So there was a lot of similarities, but I think the major difference is just like demographics, right? So like my hometown in Mississippi is about I want to say right now it's about 50-50 or maybe 48-48 with a couple other percentage points of non-black or non-white. So you go from this environment that's like half and half to going to a college, which is I think at the time maybe it was about 97-98% black. So being in this environment where it's like the student body is very black, professors,
Mm-hmm.
it's out in a rural area, and then going to somewhere where it's like the complete opposite. And that was I mean it was a bit of a culture shock. Uh, just you just get used to seeing people. It's kind of like if you live in a neighborhood, regardless of what the demographics of your neighborhood are. If you go to somewhere else and that the demographics changes, if you're going to be there for a while, it's kind of like okay, this is something I have to adjust to.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when you decided to go to Penn State and you got into your lab, like, what was your actual study on? What did you do your thesis on or your dissertation on to get your PhD?
So I worked on a protein that was a what we call a receptor tyrosine kinase. So basically, it's a protein that has a parts of it that sit outside of the cell and parts that are inside the cell. And so when it binds its ligand or it produces a signal, biochemical signal, and it tells the cell what to do. And so this molecule was the RON receptor tyrosine kinase expressed on macrophages, type of white blood cell macrophage big eater.
Mm-hmm.
Their job is to go around and gobble up a lot of cellular parts. Um, they kind of clean up a lot of things. And so what I was looking at is in the context of a bacterial infection, what does this receptor do? And it was a mouse model, so So what we really learned is this receptor. Let's get back to what I was saying about balancing the immune system.
Mm-hmm.
So what the receptor effectively did was it dampened the magnitude of an immune response. So if you can imagine bacteria in your bloodstream and certain parts of your body outside of your gut will elicit a strong response. Your body's like, wait a minute, this is a problem, we have to deal with it. While at the same time, eventually your body has to say, okay, we got this under control. We need to calm down a little bit. And
Mm-hmm.
so what the receptor did is it controlled how much of a response you got, and it also over time it helped to reduce the response. So basically, to get back to the balance of once the issue the bacteria is gone, now it's like okay, let's calm down and get back to the healing process.
Right.
So this receptor really promoted a healing environment. If you can imagine, an inflammatory response causes damage, and that damage has to be repaired.
Right.
One thing to note, so this may be a little gross, but think about if you get a burn, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in that burn, you have the liquid that we generally call pus, and it's a lot of what's in that liquid are macrophages because there's tissue damage, and macrophages move to the area to try to remove the damaged tissue. So
Right.
macrophages are a type of cell that's involved in that.
Okay. Yeah, it doesn't gross me out. I've dealt with that. Maybe it does. I hope it
Well,
doesn't gross the
I was thinking
audience.
maybe the listeners, people may be freaking out
Yeah.
for the your audience. So
Right. But yeah, so that's really cool. And so, how many years did it take you to finish your PhD?
I think I finished at like 6.5, or no, it's not 6.5. Let's see, oh 7, yeah, just about 6 years actually.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
actually almost say 6 years and a couple months if
so,
you
a
count
little
like
past six
when
years.
the semester starts. Yeah, if you count when the semester starts, so I would say 6 years. But so from the time I started to officially start the program to the time that I defended my thesis, it was 6 years.
Okay.
So,
So, after 6 years, after you completed it, you got your PhD, what came next? What did you do after that?
so I decided to do a postdoc. So if you think about my experience so I had the parasite training. Then it went from doing some training in undergrad to moving into macrophage in a mouse model. And one of the things I wanted to do is do some studies and do some work that was more relevant to humans.
Mm-hmm.
So I had the privilege of going over to the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, excuse me, to train at the time, which was called the Translational Research Program. And what the program I was in was set up to do was move rapidly from doing bench work to getting that bench work to the clinic.
Okay.
So it was a translational program, and that's when I first learned how to teach T cells how to kill cancer or HIV infected cells.
Okay. So, how is that research going now? Are we getting close to a cure, or is there anything that might be?
Cure for there's some so you know there's a caution about using cure language in
Mm-hmm.
terms of HIV. I think there are some cancers that we've been able to eradicate. Um, I think the landscape looks really good, and the reason I say that is that we're learning more and more about how we can actually do things that, for instance, if we think about the work with HIV, right? Uh, One of the things that is making some progress is so like a lot of the drugs prevent the virus. If you think about how the virus works, right, it gets into your body, infects a cell,
Mm-hmm.
it puts its genes into the cell, and it helps make more virus.
Right.
And one of the things that HIV does, it kills your CD4 T cells. Those are white blood cells that help to coordinate an immune response. So generally, people who progress to AIDS, they have an issue because they can't actually mount a response to a lot of common things that you're exposed to in your environment.
Right.
The progress is that there are some therapeutic ways that we're finding that we can prevent the virus from infecting cells. We can, take a patient's cells or take healthy cells, modify them, and give them to a patient, and those cells will be resistant. In terms of cancers, it's along the same path. So one of the interesting things about teaching T cells how to kill cancer is I use a model that used a virus as a syringe, as a molecular syringe. And
Okay.
so what we effectively had was a form of HIV that didn't replicate. So we take that virus, that lentivirus, and transduce or put a genome into a cell, and then that gene would tell the cell to make receptors that can recognize HIV or cancer.
Okay. Nice.
So,
So that's
and
really
so,
cool.
yeah, and the postdoctoral work is what prepared me for the industry job. I'm doing a lot of that now, and I was able to take I'm using a lot of the knowledge I use in my postdoctoral training here
Cool.
in industry.
Yeah. So let's kind of rewind a little bit and go back to Alcorn State or prior to Alcorn State. So
Yeah.
what made you, when you did go to college, what made you want to study science?
Uh, I was actually one of those kids that, interesting or not, so I laugh at this because it seems so odd now. I actually went to undergrad on scholarship as a undeclared major, which
So
is
you had a
kind of
scholarship.
strange. Exactly. I had an academic scholarship, but I was undeclared. It's just weird, right?
Okay.
Uh, but I was fortunate enough to have decent enough grades and test scores that I qualified for scholarship.
I would
So
have I would argue to say that it was better than decent if you got the scholarship and you were
I mean, yeah, I would say
undeclared.
it was better than decent.
Yeah.
I'm really humble, so it's kind
I
of
see.
odd to say, yeah, I had good grades. One thing I said, I graduated undergrad with honors, so
Okay.
I
Good.
graduated magna cum laude, so I'm definitely proud to talk about that.
Yeah.
But so let's go back, right? So when I was in actually from middle school to high school, I actually was more interested in doing construction. So I learned how to operate heavy equipment,
Hmm.
labor on construction sites. I'd taken a couple building trades classes in high school and like got the awards for those classes. So I was somewhat headed in that direction. Had worked over the summer and after school in those capacities. And one of the interesting things, I have to like back up for a second a lot of times in talking about science. I have a lot of formal science education,
Mm-hmm.
but one of the things I try to convey to younger people or parents when I have an opportunity to talk to them is you science isn't necessarily completely in the realm of academia or in the realm of being in a laboratory,
Right.
right? So let's think about this for a second. So we talk about STEM. Um, I was in a building trades class and taking geometry at the same time and a couple other math classes. And the interesting thing was I'm sitting in building trades classes and I realized this is geometry. Like, wait a minute. I'm
Yeah.
actually using this knowledge from this classroom, right?
Right.
So generally, if you're not into, if you're not taking math beyond uh, high school, there's a certain level, like you're not going to be using trigonometry in, everyday life.
Right.
But it was cool, like, okay, here it's applicable. And so you actually see science in practice. And so I like to remind people that science exists around us. I grew up, with vegetable gardens, a lot of pets, hunting, fishing, doing a lot of those country
Mm-hmm.
boy things. And so, and that was about life, and it was biology, it was,
Yeah.
learning weather patterns, so it was like meteorology. So, and I think generally kids are interested in all that. What we tend to do is not have figured out best ways to keep kids interested and explain science to them in an applicable way, right? So that's why I always say I teach T cells how to kill cancer. And it's like, how do you teach a cell how to do something? So my goal is to help usher in another conversation, and I think that for me that's what was helpful is like making that connection between I'm doing something every day or something practical and things I've learned in the classroom actually work.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so,
I think
so
that
what,
way, like when I talk to kids sometimes and, I get the few that's like, I don't understand science, I don't get it. I'm like, but you do it every day. If you cook yourself breakfast, all you're doing is the chemistry.
yeah,
You make bacon, you are taking one form of the matter, you're adding a catalyst, and you're turning it into another form. And
you're
so,
breathing.
I mean, yeah, it's all of it. All of it is, it's biology, chemistry, all of it surrounds us every day, you
Well,
know.
but that's an important thing, right? So for me, I'm yeah, I'm a science advocate, and I'm very excited about helping young people or actually anybody of any age, think about science.
Hmm.
So that's important. Like I said, you're like an egg. You're denaturing the protein in the egg, so that's why it
Right.
changes. So
That's
it's
why
just
it
it's
goes from clear to white, basically.
exactly. So so that's the thing, right? So kids are doing this and they get it, but what happens along the way is it becomes disconnected. And I'm not
Hmm.
sure how to get back to that and how to maintain it, or things like talking to kids about sports, right?
Hmm.
If it's football season now, right? So next week, there's a lot of college football championship games and NFL's going, or soccer, whatever. It's physics.
Right. That's it.
I
That's what
mean,
it
you're
is.
applying force, you're getting leverage, if you look at contact, you're actually creating levers, and it's an interesting thing if when you can explain it that way, and it's like, oh, okay,
Yeah, I mean
it's like, I
it's
get it.
all like I think I talked to an elementary group, and I was like, why when you play soccer do you want your grass to be very low? And they're like, I don't know. I was like, well, if it's high, will the ball go very far? If you're kicking it on the grass, well, no.
Yeah,
Okay, well that's friction. Grass is
exactly.
causing the friction, it's causing your ball to slow down. So instead of having tall grass, you want short grass.
Yeah, and I think kids get that.
Yeah.
I, we have to figure out how to keep kids engaged from that standpoint, and I think too is that the practical, practical lessons,
Mm-hmm.
getting kids out of teaching them that and it's I always find it odd that disconnect happens sometimes. Like we think about these things we're doing as like separate, but I also think that maybe it's the language. We talk about science education so much that it seems like it's something different versus maybe we shouldn't say science education. Maybe we should say we're, we're teaching life education. We're teaching
Mm-hmm.
you how how the world works. How do these things that you're doing? You walking around with a computer in your pocket
Right.
these days. How does that work?
Right.
What does it mean when that signal goes from your phone into the atmosphere, gets picked up, and your friend gets a text? Like as soon as you send it, how does it happen that fast? What's how does that work?
Right. I mean, and and I come from like a biology standpoint, and I always talk to them about what they eat. So there's a lot of high school kids I realize that drink coffee. And I'm like, I don't drink coffee, but I say you go to Starbucks, you get your coffee. Where does that come from? How did they turn a bean into this drink? Like
Exactly.
think about it. If you just really just kind of concentrate just a little bit and think outside of what your everyday life is doing. I mean, there's science all around you.
Yeah, it's like you're dissolving matter and it's like you're taking this concentrate across a gradient into a liquid.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let's go back to you. So you went from
Okay.
construction to science. Where was
Yeah.
that change when you were in college and you actually declared it?
So when my freshman year of college is I'm sitting in class, mainly biology class, biology and chemistry 101. So we're sitting in class and I'm like, okay. I'm like, oh, this is interesting, and I was doing well in the classes. And for me, the interesting thing was I looked around and there were like kids who were valedictorians in their class, right? And
Mm-hmm.
there were a couple people in the class. I guess we ended up competing with each other because it was like one of the three of us, or maybe four of us, that would have the highest grades for exams and tests and stuff. So and for me, it was kind of interesting because I was like, wait a minute, I'm actually excelling at this. So I talked to my academic advisor and like, I'm gonna major in biology, and I was actually thinking about medicine initially and going into being a physician, and
Okay.
then I did an experiment and I was like, you know what, this this is it right here.
This is the life. I like
Yeah,
this.
it's well, so you think about it, there are a lot of things that happen before a physician gets a medication or they learn how to treat people. So it's like I want to be the people who are gonna make the medications or at least help physicians learn how to help people.
Right.
So that's that and that stuck. I mean, it's been cool. I've had the opportunity to train around physicians as well as PhD level scientists, and it's cool to have these conversations to get different perspectives on stuff. And it's like this is fun.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed going to if you maybe go back to probably first class in undergrad, maybe even high school biology, but but especially from undergrad, I've enjoyed being around science. And now I look forward to going to work, getting some data.
I can't say everyone is on that same level, but if that's what you love, then that's all that matters. And
Yeah,
so,
but that's what you want, right? You want to
yeah,
be able to go to work and do something you enjoy doing, and
absolutely.
enjoy the people that you do it around.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, okay, outside of all the work that you do and outside of trying to encourage students to go into these fields by making it a life thing, what do you do for fun? Like, what does Dr. Wilson enjoy to do?
These days it's mainly like hanging out at the park, movies, you know, hanging out with friends. It's a lot of just general, generic, boring, everyday life stuff. I'm not doing anything exciting like jumping out of planes or swimming in the channel or anything. So just
Well,
just keeping it simple,
keeping it simple.
enjoying everything one day at a time. Yep.
Okay. So there's nothing that like super piques your interest or something you would want to do that you're interested in?
Like separately, I still have the construction bug. I'm looking forward to being able to at one point to have like a shop and getting back going, like doing some mill work and building a few things I can sell, and eventually into retirement I'll retire and move into maybe doing some phase of building and construction. So
Okay. That's really good. So we're almost out of time. So at this
all right.
opportunity or at this moment, if there was someone who or someone younger who kind of was interested in what you're doing, maybe thought, I don't like cancer, I want to find a way to help fight it, like what advice would you give them?
I would I would tell them to use social media, right? So one of the things that is difficult is being in proximity to people that do those things, right? So it's easy to go onto Twitter or other social media platforms and find somebody that's doing it. There's somebody that's researching cancer or any other scientific topic that you're interested in that are on social media, and you can reach out to them, engage with them, and figure out how you can get into a laboratory or get closer to it. Have someone to mentor you, and that's the more important thing is that to have somebody who's had that life experience to help guide you along the path, to help you, focus on your grades or give you some tips on how to do better in school, uh, ways of helping you find scholarships,
Mm-hmm.
ways of helping you apply for college. A lot of those things that if you there's a dream you have, if you're gonna what you have to do is move closer and closer to that dream.
Right.
And one of the easier ways to do it is to find someone who is, what I like to use something that Russell Simmons said. It's like sponsor somebody. It's not just mentor or support, but somebody that can sponsor you and help you move along that path. And it's becoming easier to do because people are more connected. So I would say try to find somebody to learn from to help you get on that path.
Cool. And I know that you do use social media. So if you want to share your Twitter, I know that you will probably respond to someone who had any questions.
Oh yeah, cool, cool. I can be contacted at Hey Dr. Wilson at HEY Wilson WILSON.
Okay, cool. So thank you very much for being on the show and sharing your life story about how you got into science. I really appreciate it. And to my audience, thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to send me an email and I will share it. And thank you. Until next week.
Thank you.
Bam.